Romans chapter 1. New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Romans. Turn there and listen to the words of Romans 1, how it describes what life is like when God says, do what you want, leaves us to our own wants and desires and ways. Start in verse 18. The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of men who suppress the truth by their wickedness. Since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, His eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. So this is the premise of this section. People have known God. They have known the truth, but they suppress it. They hold it down. They don't use it. They know about God's power. They've seen God's hand in creation. They grasp the basics of divine nature. They inherently know what's right and wrong because God put it in them. They know the difference in their heart of what is good and what is bad. Okay? They know. Verse 21. For although they knew God, they neither glorified Him as God, nor gave thanks to Him, but their thinking became futile, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools, and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images, made to look like mortal man, and birds, and animals, and reptiles. Therefore, God gave them over in their sinful desires of their hearts to sexual impurity, for the degrading of their bodies with one another. They exchanged the truth of God for a lie, and worshipped and served created things rather than the Creator, who is forever praised. Amen. So God offers a relationship with Himself, and instead people decide to worship carvings of their own making, or created beings like humans and animals. They choose to darken their hearts. They turn away from God, and even though they know better, they worship creation rather than Creator. See, this still happens today. This isn't just some faraway nation where people worship big golden statues. Think about it for a second. How many things, how many creations of man can you name that people will willingly sacrifice their lives, their hearts, their money, their time, their energy, sacrifice their emotional stability for? What created things do people put their hopes in, put their future in, that they dream of? That's worship. That which you give your time, money, energy, life, emotions, hope, dream, that's what you worship. How many created things can you name that people do that with? People say to God, I don't want you. I don't want your rules. I don't want to do the things your way. I don't want to listen to you anymore. What I want is a God of my own making who will say what I want, do what I want, and say it's okay for me to have what I want. And Paul continues, verse 26. Because of this, God gave them over to shameful lusts. So God, He has this divine respect for free will. He invented freedom of choice. He says, have it your way. And He gave them over to what they want. This is what you want? Here. Verse 26, because of this, God gave them over to shameful lusts. Even their women exchanged natural relations for unnatural one. In the same ways, the men also abandoned natural relations with women and were inflamed for lust with one another. Men committed indecent acts with other men and received in themselves the due penalty for their perversion. Ultimately, when people worship creation, they will end up worshiping the greatest part of creation, humanity. They will end up worshiping each other. They will worship the heights of human pleasure. They will pay homage to anyone who says that they are a god, that they are divine, that they can set their own rules. That you exist for one reason, to worship and glorify and bring honor to and give pleasure to yourself. That's why you exist. See, when we stop listening to God and we start listening to ourselves, this is where we end up every single time. Worshipping at the altar of humanity and self. But it doesn't end there. Keep reading. Verse 28. Furthermore, since they did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, He gave them over to a depraved mind, to do what ought not to be done. They have become filled with every kind of wickedness, evil, greed, and depravity. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, and malice. They're gossips, slanderers, God-haters, insolent, arrogant, boastful. They invent ways of doing evil. They disobey their parents. They're senseless, faithless, heartless, ruthless. Although they know God's righteous decree that those who do such things deserve death, they not only continue to do these very things, but also approve of those who practice them. Tell me this doesn't describe the world we live in today. And we have the gall to blame God for all the many things that go wrong in life. All He's done is given us exactly what we asked for. He offers us a new mind. And in verse 28, it says, we did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God. So He gives us over to the depraved mind we want instead. We told Him to shut up. We start listening to ourselves. We end up exactly where that kind of thinking leads. We should never wonder why God allows things to happen. What we should really wonder at is why God would be merciful to us at all. Why do we not hear God? It's mostly because we don't want to. We don't want to listen. We want to hear our own words telling us what we want to hear, rather than God's words telling us what we need to hear. So the question stands. How can we hear from God? I think there's 4 things we can pull out of the story of Samuel that will help us to understand how we can hear God. Let's take a look at verse 3. Go back to Samuel. 1 Samuel chapter 3. Hopefully you kept your finger there. Starting verse 2. One night Eli, whose eyes were becoming so weak that he could barely see, was lying down in his usual place. The lamp of God had not yet gone out. Now that's the lamp that is in the stand next to the ark, and it's lit, keeps going all day, but it basically goes out right before the sun comes up. And so we know it's late, what that means. So the lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the temple of the Lord, where the ark of God was. First point, where's Samuel sleeping? He's sleeping right next to the place where God dwelt on earth, and he didn't even know it. The Ark of God is also called the Ark of the Covenant, made famous by Indiana Jones. It was the